They wheeled in the champagne like we'd cured cancer. Confetti cannons, branded cupcakes, the CFO crying for some reason, maybe the stock options hit. I stood there, plastic flute in hand, smile stapled to my face, while our baby, the product we'd built in garages and server closets and blackout weekends, was officially swallowed by a corporate python in a $312 million acquisition. Everyone clapped. I tried not to scream. New CEO, a man who looked like he practiced his empathy in the mirror, wrapped an arm around me and called me the brain behind the brand. He pronounced our product wrong, twice, then handed me a branded fleece jacket like I'd just joined his frat. Excited to have you on board for the next chapter, he said. I nodded and made a mental note to start printing things. Important things. Here's the thing they didn't get. The founding team wasn't just ornamental. We weren't the quirky geniuses to parade around for press. We were the beating heart, the blueprint, the weirdos who knew why that one legacy script had to sleep for 12 milliseconds or else the entire notification engine had a panic attack. They were acquiring a castle, sure, but the moat, the drawbridge, the skeleton key, that was us. And deep in the labyrinth of the acquisition paperwork, tucked between non-compete clauses and retention bonus promises, was one line. One clause that cost them everything. If any founder is terminated without cause within 24 months of acquisition, all proprietary IP shall revert to the founding entity, effective immediately. A clause born from 2 bottles of Pinot Noir, a very stubborn lawyer named Darlene, and me, eyes bloodshot at 2 a.m., fighting like hell for the soul of what we'd made. I wasn't expecting betrayal. I was just expecting laziness. Turns out both would come in droves. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say this in the middle of a story about corporate treachery, but if you've gotten this far, I'm begging you, help me hit my first 10,000 subscribers. 97% of folks just listen and never click. That's like showing up to a potluck with an empty plate and eating all the potato salad. One tap and you'll be helping this chaos engine keep running. Anyway, the press release read like a wedding vow. Together we'll reach new heights. A shared vision, unparalleled synergy. The reality was 14-hour onboarding meetings where the new overlords explained how to run our own damn company back to us, one bullet point at a time. They called it integration. We called it death by PowerPoint. And yet, I played along, smiled at the all hands, let them rename our Slack channels. Didn't flinch when they assigned a junior project manager to shadow me and capture institutional knowledge, as if my brain was a PDF waiting to be downloaded. But I knew exactly how many months we had. I knew the clause. I knew they'd never bother to read it, tucked where it was, hiding behind 3 appendices and a mountain of footnotes. They thought they were buying a machine. They didn't know they were pulling the pin on a grenade. I should have known they'd never bother to read it. The consultants showed up like a bad rash, spreading fast, hard to ignore, and somehow always dressed in shades of beige. There were 3 of them at first, flown in from New York with names that sounded like pharmaceuticals: Chadwick, Sloan, Everett. They didn't build things, they optimized processes, which in plain English meant turning meetings into monologues and replacing gut instinct with metrics no one cared about. Their first move, vision realignment. 2 weeks of forced bonding exercises, trust falls, and PowerPoints explaining how to pivot toward synergy. The same synergy we'd already spent a decade perfecting without their input. One slide actually had a photo of a lighthouse with the words innovation anchored in agility slapped over it like a motivational poster in a dentist's office. By week 3, our whiteboards were gone, replaced by collaboration zones filled with beanbags no one wanted to sit in. It gave us new company laptops preloaded with software that monitored typing speed and flagged idle time, as if creative problem-solving could be measured in keystrokes, as if they had any idea how long it took to build a self-healing database schema from scratch. Then came the layers, middle managers with clipboards, new titles like Strategic Enablement Officer and Workflow Evangelist. I had a boss now, and who wore loafers without socks and called me young lady in meetings. I'm 42, and I wrote the foundational code he mispronounced while trying to explain it to a client. They started sidelining us one team at a time. My co-founder Mia, who once presented our compression protocol at DEF Con, was reassigned to user empathy research. Translation: she spent her days making fake customer personas for an intern to review. Nick, our CTO, had to justify every code commit through Jira tickets that took longer to write than the actual fixes. And me? I became a mascot. They paraded me into meetings with investors but never let me speak. Let the numbers do the talking, Sloan would say, as he mangled our growth chart and credited Q2 success to a marketing pivot instead of the 2-week server migration I bled out over Memorial Day weekend. I used to argue, used to correct them in meetings, fight tooth and nail for accuracy, integrity, vision. But somewhere in week 6 I stopped. Let them talk. Let them rename our product roadmap the success spiral. Let them believe they were leading something they didn't understand. Because here's the truth, it's easier to let a fool walk into a trap than try to explain where the floor falls out. So I smiled, nodded, even thanked them once for their fresh eyes. Every time they ignored my suggestions, I logged it. Every time they rewrote part of the code base without looping us in, I archived it. They were digging a hole and I wasn't about to stop them. Frustrated? Absolutely. But not panicked, not bitter, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a pressure valve bursts. I had 16 months and change left, and the countdown had already begun. It happened on a Tuesday, mid-morning, bright outside, dead quiet in the war room. Mia didn't even get a heads up. One minute we were reviewing stress logs from the weekend patch. The next her calendar went blank and her Slack icon turned to a cold little X like a tombstone. I knew that shade of gray, final logout gray. She walked back into the office 10 minutes later, white envelope in hand, eyes like broken glass. No HR rep, no manager. Just a security contractor standing a polite 6 feet behind her like he was waiting for her to detonate. He said I was redundant, she whispered, dropping the envelope on my desk like it burned her fingers. Redundant. I built the compression engine they're still licensing to half of Asia. The severance packet was thin, maybe 6 pages. One of them was a non-disparagement clause in 14-point bold. Another reminded her to exit the building calmly and without accessing company resources, like she was going to start smashing servers with a desk lamp. She didn't cry. Mia doesn't cry. She just looked around the office she helped paint, helped wire, helped bless with takeout boxes in caffeinated desperation, and said, "Guess I'm the first." And that's when it hit me. The clause. The one no one read, the one I fought for like my life depended on it. It didn't trigger on my firing alone. It activated the moment any of us were gone. Mia was out. That was one of 3 keys turned. I didn't run to legal. I didn't call Darlene. I didn't scream through the office waving a red flag. I just closed my laptop, reached under my desk, and pulled out the old external drive I hadn't touched in over a year. It was dusty, matte black, and password-locked like Fort Knox. I didn't steal code, not even a semicolon. What I copied were things you couldn't version control. Archived emails from board meetings, time-stamped architecture blueprints with my signature, Slack messages between me and Mia documenting the early development process. Proof. Not evidence for court, evidence for the public. They wanted to erase us. Fine. But you can't erase what's already been notarized, uploaded, geo-redundantly backed up, and split into a dead man's switch if needed. I labeled the folder for after and encrypted the whole damn thing in triplicate. Then I sat back in my chair and stared at the chair Mia used to occupy. Empty now. Still spun slightly from where she'd stood. I wasn't sad. I was protective of her, of what we'd built, of the part of myself I'd buried in every line of that product, through all the weekends lost, birthdays skipped, boyfriends ghosted because the database wouldn't sync. This wasn't grief. This was pause. A breath drawn in the quiet before movement. They thought they could dismantle us piece by piece. But they didn't realize some machines break worse when you take out just one gear. New hire's name was Bryce. 27, Stanford MBA, haircut sharp enough to slice drywall, and the emotional range of a LinkedIn post. He introduced himself to me with a handshake that screamed, "My dad golfs with the board." "Hey, so excited to absorb your knowledge," he said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "I'll be heading up product from now on. Hope we can make some magic together." I don't remember blinking. I just remember thinking. They replaced me with a man who uses synergy as a verb. Within a week, I was removed from the roadmap meetings. No email, no explanation, just suddenly, no invite. I found out the backend had been restructured when the dashboard started returning 503 errors on live client demos. They didn't loop me in. They didn't even ask for review. They just pushed directly to production like toddlers hotwiring a school bus. Feature flags were toggled off at random. /B tests were launched without proper segmentation. One build somehow rolled back to a pre-patch version we hadn't touched since 2019 and took the client analytics package with it. Clients started emailing support. Support started forwarding those emails to me, because despite the demotion, I was still the only one who knew where the bodies were buried in the code. Bryce blamed legacy spaghetti, called it technical debt from the old guard. Old guard, that was the new insult. I saw it on Slack threads, passive-aggressive jabs in the company-wide channels. We're modernizing, one product designer wrote, not everyone's keeping up. Another, let's stop worshipping sacred cows. Sacred cows, that's what they were calling our foundational architecture now. You know, the system that ran the damn company. Nick tried to speak up in one of the cross-functional meetings, tried to explain how the new user tracking module was overriding login sessions and causing permission leaks. Bryce cut him off with, "Thanks for the history lesson, but we're moving forward." I didn't fight it, didn't correct him, didn't pull rank or point to the exact line in the user access model where his brilliant refactor broke everything. I just opened my notebook, wrote down the exact time, date, and bug ID. Every time they bypassed protocol, I logged it. Every time a release caused a cascade failure, I took screenshots. When clients started asking why features were missing or broken, I archived the messages and tracked which product manager gave them copy-paste responses. Cold anger is cleaner than rage. It doesn't burn, it chills, sharpens, makes you watch them flail while thinking you did this to yourself. They wanted me out of the spotlight? Fine. Enjoy the stage, enjoy the bugs. Enjoy the mounting churn rate and your increasingly frantic investor update decks. I kept showing up, smiling, nodding, taking notes like I was the intern now, but every smile was a knife they didn't know they'd handed me. Every bug they pushed was a brick in the wall they were building around themselves. Let them hang themselves. I wasn't pulling any rope. I was just watching and waiting. They called it a realignment of strategic direction. That's what the email said. No meeting. No explanation. No human voice to deliver the blow, just a calendar invite titled Offboarding Touchpoint, dropped into my inbox at 7:04 a.m. like a dead bird on the doorstep. When I arrived, the room was already prepped. Laptop open, forms printed, water bottle with the company logo like a parting gift from a cult. Bryce wasn't there. Of course he wasn't. HR sent someone I'd never met, Janice or Janet, or something with a soft J. She kept saying words like transition and gratitude for your leadership, like we were burying a hamster, not decapitating a legacy. No one mentioned the bugs. No one brought up the catastrophic client call from last Friday, where the API silently dropped 2/3 of the order confirmations into the void. They didn't even have the decency to pretend this was about performance. Just restructuring. Just growth. Just words that sounded like progress but felt like rot. They slid the paperwork across the table like a dinner check. I read every line, not because I didn't know what it said, but because I wanted them to watch me read it. Slow, calm, pen tapping once for every lie I'd been fed, then I signed it. One smooth stroke, smiled so wide I could hear Janice inhale. This won't be the last you hear of me, I said, not as a threat, but as a courtesy. And I meant it. Not how she thought. They didn't escort me out. There were no security guards or last-minute theatrics. Just silence, cold and clinical. My keycard still worked when I tapped it against the door. I paused in the lobby, let the weight of the moment settle. The logo on the wall, polished chrome, backlit in corporate blue, glared at me like it knew what it had done. I looked straight at it. Day one, I whispered, because that's what it was. Mia had been first, I was the second. Nick, well, his NDA was due for renegotiation in 2 weeks, and he wasn't exactly hiding his disgust anymore. But none of that mattered, not now. Because with my termination, the clause was no longer dormant. It was live, triggered, binding, ironclad. If any founder is terminated without cause within 24 months of acquisition, all proprietary IP shall revert to the founding entity, effective immediately. 16 months and 2 days. That's how long it took them to shoot themselves in the foot. I walked out of the building with nothing but a backpack, a thin stack of papers, and a smile that didn't reach my eyes, because my eyes weren't sad. They were calculating. Let the countdown begin. At first, everything looked fine. They were still posting launch updates on LinkedIn, new client wins, team selfies, hashtags like #innovation in motion. Bryce even gave a talk at some tech brunch called Scaling with Speed, where he bragged about removing legacy friction like we were barnacles on the hull of his success yacht. I watched it all from my kitchen table, coffee in hand, cat purring like a thread in my lap. No login needed, just publicly available hubris on full display. They updated code, deployed features, rolled out a slick new UI update that broke half the accessibility options we'd spent 6 months perfecting, onboarded 2 enterprise clients and made the mistake of demoing real-time integration before QA signed off. The demo crashed, twice, but the real unraveling started slow. A small glitch at first, API keys invalidating for no reason. Then webhook payloads mysteriously timing out. Clients started noticing. A logistics partner emailed in a panic, our shipments aren't syncing. Is your system down? Support brushed it off. Temporary issue. DNS hiccup, try clearing your cache. But the glitches multiplied like mold. One retail client's inventory data backfilled to 2021. Another saw purchase histories vanish altogether. The automated system flags built to catch these exact issues had been disabled weeks prior during one of Bryce's agility sprints. By week 3, tickets tripled, then quadrupled. Internal Slack channels exploded. Who has access to the schema backups? Why are the integrations failing across environments? Why aren't the keys renewing after token refresh? I could have answered that last one, actually, because those keys weren't theirs anymore. The clause didn't just revert source code and documentation. It reverted ownership of the infrastructure stack, the core IP, the system's spine. The auth layers were legally mine now. They'd been running on borrowed time, calling functions that no longer belonged to them. I watched quietly. No press release, no legal nuke, just silence. Strategic, satisfying silence. Nick sent me a one-line message the day their status page hit partial outage. They're still digging. Just realized the shovel's missing. Middle management started calling emergency syncs. I knew the signs, the nervous emoji reactions, the 10 p.m. email blasts begging engineers to check things just one more time. It's hard to fix something when the thing you're trying to fix isn't technically yours anymore. I didn't gloat, didn't call anyone, didn't even leak the clause to the press, because the best part of revenge is patience. Let them patch the symptoms. Let them push hotfixes in the dark. They still hadn't figured it out, not fully. But they would. Oh, they would. It started with a screenshot. Someone, maybe an intern, maybe a pissed-off junior dev, leaked a string of Slack messages to Blind. Nothing explicit, just the usual corporate decay. Panicked messages in the #ops escalation channel, timestamped at 2:14 a.m. Does anyone know why the staging keys aren't provisioning? We can't access the backup schema. Who was responsible for the offboarding protocols? Can someone please confirm if the legal team ever updated the rights to the API layer? That last one? That was the needle slipping under the skin. The thread spread like wildfire. Current employees chimed in anonymously, finger-pointing, conspiracy theories, one poor soul even suggesting the system had been hexed by the founders. It wasn't a hex. It was a contract. By day 3 of the outage, a lawyer finally reread the acquisition terms. Not a new lawyer, one of the original ones, the kind who thought of fine print as garnish. She found it buried in the section labeled Contingency Triggers, page 58 of the third appendix. In the event that any original founder is terminated without cause prior to the 24-month retention period, all rights to proprietary source code, underlying IP, authentication infrastructure, data schemas, and derivative works shall immediately revert to the founding entity, as defined in Clause 3.7a. Immediate. No grace period. No appeals. No takebacks. The room must have gone cold. I like to imagine the new CEO's face, waxen, staring at a document he signed without reading. $1 million handshake unraveling in his palm. Their lawyers scrambled. I know this because suddenly, emails started appearing in my old inbox, the one tied to my founder address. Pleasantly panicked. We'd love to reconnect and discuss possible transition options. Are you open to a short-term licensing arrangement while we restructure? We believe there may have been a misunderstanding in interpretation. I ignored them. They tried calling. The number rang to a voicemail that simply said, if you're calling about something you broke, try turning it off and reading the terms you ignored. What they didn't know, what they should have checked, was that the founding entity was no longer just a paper corporation we set up in 2013 for tax purposes. 2 months before I was terminated, I'd registered a new LLC in Delaware. Quietly, cleanly, with Mia and Nick as co-founders. Different name, new domain, same soul. They couldn't reach us because we weren't coming back. We'd already moved on, already building, already offering stability in the middle of their collapse. They didn't just lose the IP. They lost the trust of every partner, vendor, and client who now realized the shiny new management team didn't actually own what they'd been selling. Justice doesn't always wear a cape. Sometimes it wears a signature on page 58. By the time their fourth temporary outage made headlines on TechCrunch, we were already running stable builds on our alpha environment. We didn't rebuild the old system. We evolved it, stripped it for parts, and redesigned the engine to hum instead of grind. No Frankenstein patchwork. No corporate overhead. Just code that moved like breath, tight, clean, and hours. We worked out of Nick's garage at first, then moved into a modest little loft above a coffee roastery that smelled like ambition and burnt espresso. Mia handled the product relaunch. I focused on architecture. Nick dealt with infra and charm, mostly charm. The three of us back in rhythm. No stakeholders, no slide decks, no trust falls or vision boards. Just late nights, bad takeout, and the kind of laughter that sounds like healing. The funny thing about fire is, it clears the brush. Clients saw the smoke and started looking for exits. They reached out one by one in hushed emails and cautious DMs. Hey, just wondering if you all are working on anything new? We're looking for something more stable, familiar but reliable. We've had 6 integration failures in 2 weeks. If there's an alternative, we never pitched, never chased, never uttered the name of the company that had tried to bury us. We just answered honestly, yes. Building something better. Yes, it supports your existing workflows. Yes, we can onboard you by end of month. No fireworks, no poaching, just a quiet return to gravity. Even some of the employees from the old team found their way back to us. Engineers, designers, customer support leads, the ones who still believed in what we built the first time. They didn't ask for promises, they just asked if they could help. We called the new platform Lantern. As in, light in the dark. A nod to the chaos we'd survived and the clarity we were chasing. Every line of code was a refusal. Every feature a correction. We launched in beta with 11 clients. By the second month, we had 34. Investors started calling again, this time on our terms. I did a podcast interview in early spring. The host asked about the transition, about the acquisition, the firings, the comeback. I smiled and said, sometimes disruption isn't about breaking things. Sometimes it's about watching what breaks when you leave. No names, no shade, just facts with fangs. We weren't out for revenge. That part was already done. This was resurrection, a rebirth by contract. The quiet power of knowing you weren't just right, you were ready. The outage hit on a Thursday morning, prime time for client logins. Finance dashboards froze, logistics APIs dumped error codes, and the e-commerce integrations just stopped. Not gracefully, not even with a warning, just blank, like the backend had been unplugged mid-sentence. By noon, Twitter was on fire. Anyone else seeing total failure on redacted platform? We just lost 8 hours of transactional data. Support won't respond. Is the company dead? Their status page, normally pristine and useless, was a bleeding grid of red boxes. Every region, every system, down. The official response came 2 hours later. Single sentence, we are investigating a critical disruption affecting core systems. Translation, we don't know who owns the thing we broke anymore. Internally, chaos, executives yanked into emergency Zooms, engineers trying to recompile a system they no longer had legal rights to touch. The license keys that used to renew automatically, revoked. The infrastructure stack they took for granted, gone. No backups, no access, no rollback plan. Clients fled, some quietly, some loudly. One partner issued a public statement that read, "We no longer believe the vendor has operational control over its platform." That same afternoon, a journalist at Wired published the headline that sent the stock into freefall. Fortune 500 giant loses core platform after firing founders. IP reversion clause ignored. The article was brutal. Cited the clause word for word. Laid out the sequence of mistakes with surgical precision. Interviewed former engineers, clients, even an anonymous board member who admitted they never realized what the clause actually meant. By market close, the company's IPO filing was pulled. 3 board members resigned within 48 hours. Investors demanded audits. And the CEO, Mr. Empathy in the Mirror, got absolutely roasted on CNBC when the anchor asked, "So, did you read any of the acquisition documents?" He stammered something about legal misinterpretation and unexpected founder actions. Unexpected, that's what he called it, like we were a rogue weather system. I watched it all from my new office, a sunlit, quiet space with pale wood floors, big windows, and a single fern I kept forgetting to water. The TV was on low. The anchor moved on to the next segment. I didn't celebrate, didn't raise a glass, just sipped my coffee and let the silence stretch long. This wasn't victory, it was inevitability. They thought they bought us. What they really did was pay for our comeback. Thanks for watching, you Cubicle Warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the Coffee Pot strikes again.